Well, as Donald Trump and his Department of Justice try to walk it back from the precipice of a constitutional crisis of epic proportion by filing a half-page affidavit by the Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche in response to a command and order by Chief Judge Boasberg of the D.C. District Court. And will it work? Or will the judge see it as, again, woefully insufficient as he tries to determine whether contempt proceedings are appropriate because the Trump administration continued to send airplanes to Venezuela with migrants and undocumented when the judge ordered them not to? I'm Michael Popok with an update of a fast-moving story here on the MeidasTouch network. Chief Judge Boasberg, just yesterday, ordered the Trump administration to fix a problem of their own making by filing a woefully insufficient or deficient declaration, an affidavit under oath. The judge asked them to submit something from a cabinet-level person declaring that they were seriously considering invoking the state secrets privilege, to prevent them from disclosing to the judge information about the flights to Venezuela. This all blew up last Saturday after a hearing in which the judge entered a temporary restraining order, finding that it was likely that the movements, the American Civil Liberties Union, and 6 different Venezuelans, and the class of people impacted by Donald Trump's unconstitutional exercise of war powers and the Alien Enemies Act was likely to be found to be unconstitutional, ordered those planes turned around and to have those deportations stopped. But planes kept coming. No surprise, since Tom Homan, who's our border czar, on Fox News while this was all going on, said he's not going to listen to federal judges. He's not going to listen to anybody except his president of the United States. He's going to continue to deport. And the judge wants to get to the bottom of why that happened. He demanded that the Trump administration file with him information that gives him what happened, why it happened, how it happened, and who was responsible for it happening. The Trump administration said, we need more time. We may be invoking the state secrets privilege. That's a privilege that the United States Supreme Court developed in the 1950s, not in this context, not to deny a federal judge who already has top secret security clearance information to get to the bottom of whether an order has been violated. It's generally used when a plaintiff has brought a case. In order to prove his case or her case, he's got to use a top secret information. The government swoops in, declares that it's state secrets, and therefore the case has to be dismissed because the state secrets can't be revealed. But that's really not applicable to this scenario. And the judge told the Trump administration, state secrets privilege? I don't see that. But if you're going to do it, then I want you to invoke it now and give me the basis and the grounds for it. Instead, they filed an affidavit, a declaration yesterday from a guy named Cerna, who sits out in Texas, who's the acting deputy field director for ICE, that he knows or he's heard about cabinet level discussions about the assertion of the privilege. Okay. First of all, we have a little thing in the law called hearsay, and this guy didn't have actual knowledge of these discussions, didn't even mention the cabinet level people that were having the discussions, who they were having the discussions with. I mean, normally when you try to assert a privilege and there's discussions going on, you have like a lawyer, you have the client, in this case, cabinet level. You would say on this date, this lawyer with this cabinet level person discussed this issue. Now, you can't go further to blow the privilege, even if it was attorney-client privilege or state secret privilege, but the judge is entitled to that information. And so instead they got I heard there might have been a meeting that I didn't attend, and we're thinking about it, and we need more time. And they filed that piece of paper late. So the judge fired back. I did a hot take that's up on the network right now about it. The judge said, that's woefully insufficient. You don't even have actual knowledge. I want by Friday at 10 a.m. a filing, which we now have, from somebody who has personal factual knowledge of cabinet level discussions going on about whether the state secrets privilege is going to be asserted, a privilege I've told you I don't think applies. And then if I get that, if that's even correct, then by the 25th next week, I want you to tell me whether you're asserting it or not. one is the discussion about it, the other one's the assertion of it, and the grounds for that. And do all that. And also, while you're at it, I want to file your brief by the 25th about why you're not in contempt. I'm issuing an order to show cause as to why those planes flew after I told them to return. Plain and simple. Separate and apart from them, and to reach you from the new declaration, which I think is woefully deficient as well. But the new thing that's also going on in court today, because there's like 3 different spinning plates in this case. There's the issue of the contempt. There's the issue of whether the underlying temporary restraining order is valid and constitutional itself from Judge Boasberg. And that's being litigated at the trial court level through hearings today. And then at the next level of appeal, the D.C. Court of Appeals, and up to the Supreme Court. And then you've got the appellate issue, where Donald Trump has tried to run a couple of times to the appellate court, one to get Boasberg bounced and reassigned, because he doesn't say this in his papers, but he says it out loud out in front of the courthouse. He just doesn't say it in the courtroom or in his filings. He's corrupt, he's leftist, he doesn't like me, he's a lunatic, and the rest. In papers, he just says, it's outrageous that a single federal judge has tried to stop airplanes. It's like, well, no, that's how the checks and balance system works, but that's for another day. So you got those 3 spinning plates going on. Now, here's the filing, and you tell me, you can leave in comments whether you think this is sufficient or insufficient. And I promise you don't have to have gone to law school in order to make that determination. So who steps into the fray? Todd Blanche. You might be scratching your head saying, don't I know that name? Yes, because everybody at the highest levels in the Department of Justice now are these unqualified people whose only qualification is they used to be the criminal defense lawyer for Donald Trump. They were the only criminal defense lawyers that were willing to take the case. All the other big law firms who are now all being tormented by Donald Trump to get money out of them, to extort them, refused to represent Donald Trump because, let's be frank, he was a convicted criminal and sex abuser, and he participated in the insurrection or caused the insurrection that almost toppled democracy. These law firms didn't want anything to do with him. They didn't want to touch him with a 10-foot pole. Of course, now they're paying the price. Some are suing Donald Trump to get off the shit list, the declaration that they shouldn't, that they're terrible, terrible law firms and people like Perkins Coie. And some are just bending over and obeying and stroking checks for $40 million or the equivalent in legal services, like a giant firm in New York that I know well called Paul Weiss, who had the misfortune, apparently, of hiring Mark Pomerantz, who used to work in the Manhattan DA's office as a special prosecutor, who wrote a book, People versus Donald Trump, and Donald Trump didn't like it. And so he went after Mark Pomerantz and, by extension, Paul Weiss. So the only lawyers that were left were lawyers who left their law firms because their law firms threw them out to go form their own private practice with a client base of one, Donald Trump. Todd Blanche was one of the lead lawyers. He tried the case that lost the 34-count felony conviction. He was hanging around the case involving Donald Trump being adjudged a sex abuser. But he was successful in avoiding Donald Trump being sentenced. He was successful in delaying the Mar-a-Lago case long enough to get a ridiculous order out of Judge Eileen Cannon. He was successful in delaying things in D.C. long enough that Judge Chutkan couldn't go forward with her case, and Donald Trump got reelected. So if his job was to delay and foot drag long enough for Donald Trump to possibly win election, he did. So now he's the Deputy Attorney General. What is the Deputy Attorney General? That is, they call that internally, that's the bad cop. You think Pam Bondi's the bad cop? Well, then Pam Bondi's the bad cop and Todd Blanche is the homicidal cop. Because the number 2 in the Department of Justice, I think it was Lisa Monaco under Merrick Garland, is always the enforcer. It's the keeper of the flame. It's the keeper of the doctrine and the discipline. It's the one that it's the chief operating officer. It runs the day-to-day operations of the office. So Todd Blanche, who just got confirmed recently, he stepped in and he filed his submission. His declaration is 3 paragraphs, one of which is identifying who he is. So it's 2 substantive paragraphs, really one substantive paragraph. Here's what he says. Now remember, the problem was that Cerna, Robert Cerna, who submitted a declaration, wasn't in the meetings, only heard about them, and so didn't know about the deliberations. So the judge says, I want somebody with factual knowledge of cabinet-level discussions about this possible assertion, because I don't believe it, and then I want the decision by Monday. Here's what he says. On March 20th, 2025, the government submitted a declaration from Robert L. Senna II, which stated, I understand that cabinet secretaries are currently actively considering whether to invoke the state secrets privilege, this privilege from 1953 on the Supreme Court I told you about, over the other facts requested by the court's order. That's about the who, what, why, and when of these Venezuelan deportation flights to the, I'll just call them the President Bukele prisons in El Salvador. Doing so is a serious matter that requires careful consideration. This is from the original declaration of Serna, which takes more than 24 hours. Okay. And here's the one substantive line in this declaration. I attest to the accuracy of those statements based on personal knowledge of the events described by Mr. Senna, including my direct involvement in ongoing cabinet-level discussions regarding invocation of the state secrets privilege. And then he signs it under penalty of perjury. So what's he trying to do? He's trying to tell the court that he's been involved as the Deputy Attorney General in cabinet level discussions. And that could include, I mean, he's not in the cabinet, but he is the number 2 lawyer at a cabinet level department, the Department of Justice, his boss being Pam Bondi. So I assume that means Pam Bondi is discussing with the State Department, Marco Rubio, who's been big on these deportations, Elon Musk, who loves the deportations, Donald Trump, Stephen Miller, who along with Kristi Noem came up with this harebrained scheme. Those are discussions about whether they can or can't. I think by the skin of their nose, this will satisfy the judge, although he did leave open the door that he'd want to ask for more information. In conjunction with that, we're going to have to see what happens on the 25th. Which is Tuesday, when they file all their briefing about why they shouldn't be found in contempt and whether they're really going to try to assert the state secrets. I think they lose on the state secrets privilege. It's not applicable here. You can't use it to deny a judge's ability to administer justice in the courthouse and to use his inherent authority to do so. I think they lose that argument at the D.C. Circuit Court, Court of Appeals, and they certainly will lose it at the United States Supreme Court. It might be a tough fight, might be 5-4 at the Supreme Court, but I believe they'll lose it there also. And I don't think this is going to get them to avoid contempt. We're going to have to see what happens next. Jeff Boasberg's been called a lot of dirty words. A lot of sticks and stones been thrown his way. And he's still standing. And last I looked, he's still wearing that black robe and still has a lifetime appointment and friends in high places like Brett Kavanaugh, his roommate from law school, who's on the Supreme Court, and Chief Justice Roberts, who came to his aid with a historic public rebuke of Donald Trump. Is Donald Trump losing votes that he desperately needs on the Supreme Court to uphold his most unconstitutional policies? That's really where we're going next. I'll continue to follow it all here on the MeidasTouch Network. So until my next report, I'm Michael Popok. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.